picture this. The final whistle blows. High-stakes football match, the crowd's going wild. But for the players on the pitch, the real game, this kind of invisible battle for recovery, that's only just kicking off.
Absolutely. And it's a huge challenge. How do these elite athletes actually get back to peak performance? Sometimes they only have, 2 or 3 days after pushing their bodies to the absolute limit.
That's the question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
In elite football, the schedule is just, it's relentless.
Hmm.
They're expected to be at their best week in, week out, often with hardly any rest.
And you have to ask, is that even sustainable? I mean, what really happens inside a player's body and mind when that recovery window is just too small?
Exactly. So that's what we're diving into today. We want to get into the science behind football recovery. What does a match actually do to a player? How long does it truly take to recover?
And crucially, which recovery strategies actually work? Which ones are backed by solid scientific evidence?
Yeah, get ready for some insights that might genuinely change how you look at the beautiful game. So let's start right there. Just how intense is the life of a top-level professional footballer? What are the demands on their bodies?
Oh, the demands are staggering, really. If you look at successful teams, the ones juggling domestic leagues, maybe the Champions League, international games, they can face up to 70 competitive matches in a single season.
70? Wow.
Yeah, and what's maybe even more telling is that often they have more weeks playing 2 matches than just one. I saw data from one recent season. A top team had 20 weeks with 2 matches, add in international breaks, and suddenly that's 28 weeks of the year with that double load.
That's an incredible volume. And FIFA, the governing body, they recommend at least 2 days between matches, but it's only a recommendation, right? Not a hard rule.
Exactly. It's just guidance. And we see it in reality. I remember reports. Wasn't there a team asked to play Wednesday night and then turn around and play Friday night?
Yeah, that's barely 48 hours. It seems crazy.
It is. And it's not just us saying this. You hear it straight from the top managers. Ancelotti, Mancini, Mourinho, Conte. They frequently use words like exhausted when they talk about their players because the schedule is just so packed.
I remember Mancini at Man City. Didn't he complain about the English fixture list, saying players are not machines?
He did. And it underlines that this is a real physical toll, not just, feeling a bit tired.
Okay, so it's clearly more than just tiredness. There's a real physical cost. Which brings us to a key point. When we talk about fatigue after a game, is it always the same kind of fatigue? Or does it change?
That's a good question. It's not quite the same. So a single match causes what we call acute fatigue. That's basically a temporary drop in your maximal muscle strength, and it can take several days to get back to normal.
Okay, so that's after one game.
Right. But when players have repeated matches back-to-back in a really congested schedule, that acute fatigue doesn't get enough time to fully disappear. So it starts to build up, and that leads to chronic fatigue.
So it accumulates.
Exactly. And that accumulation is a major worry because if you look at when non-contact injuries happen, they often occur late in the first half or late in the second half.
Which strongly suggests fatigue is playing a role.
Precisely. Your body's just not reacting optimally.
That makes sense. Tired muscles, slower reactions, maybe poor technique creeping in.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something earlier that really caught my attention. That the usual ways we measure performance don't always show the injury risk.
Yes, this is really interesting. There was a key study by Dupont and his colleagues. They looked at 32 professional players from a top team playing in the Champions League over 2 whole seasons.
Okay, what do they find?
Well, this is the counterintuitive part. They looked at physical performance during games, total distance run, high-intensity running, sprints, all that stuff. And they found these metrics were not significantly different when players played 2 matches a week compared to just 1.
Wait, so they look just as sharp on the pitch, covering the same ground, sprinting just as much?
According to the specific metrics, yes. They looked, on paper, just as effective.
Okay, but here comes the punchline, right? The bit that changes everything for player safety.
Exactly. This is the crucial insight. Despite that similar physical output, the injury rate, it was more than 6 times higher when players had 2 matches a week compared to 1.
6 times?
6 times. We're talking 25.6 injuries per 1,000 hours of exposure with 2 matches a week versus just 4.1 injuries with 1 match a week.
Wow, that is stark.
It really is. And it shows so clearly that those standard physical performance numbers don't tell the whole story. A player might look fine, hitting their usual distances, but underneath, their body is under immense stress, making them way more vulnerable to getting injured.
6 times higher. That's genuinely staggering. It means a player could be running around looking totally normal, but their underlying injury risk is through the roof. And this wasn't just a one-off finding, was it?
No, not at all. Other studies back this up. Ekstrand and his team looked at the 2002 World Cup. They found 60% of players who'd played more than one match a week before the tournament either got injured or underperformed during it.
60%?
Yeah. And then there's an 11-season study by Bengtson and others. They confirmed injury rates went up in league games when players had less than 4 days recovery compared to when they had 6 or more days.
So the pattern is pretty clear. Less recovery time equals higher injury risk. What about the impact on the team as a whole? How does this affect results?
Well, the impact is huge. There was a study with pro teams in Qatar that found a really strong link between having fewer injuries and better overall team performance. It makes sense, right? Injuries mean a weaker squad, fewer tactical options.
It disrupts everything.
Absolutely. And think about those big European weeks. Teams playing in the Champions League midweek. They were found to be over 3 times more likely to lose their next league match just 3 days later, compared to their normal league form.
You often see those surprise results, don't you?
Yeah.
After a tough midweek game.
Exactly. It all just highlights how urgent it is to get recovery strategies right. It's about protecting players, yes, but it's also fundamental to team success.
Okay, that logically leads us to the big question. How long does it actually take for a professional footballer to recover from a match? Because all this suggests the typical turnarounds are often just too short.
They really are in many cases. If you look at the data, physical performance drops right after a match. Take sprinting, for example. A 20-meter sprint time can be down by, say, 9% to even 37% immediately post-match.
37%, that's massive.
It can be, yes. And getting back to baseline, that can take anywhere from 57 hours up to 96 hours.
Okay, so 57 to 96 hours, that's already over 2 days, maybe up to 4 days, just to get sprinting power back fully.
Right.
What about other things, like jumping or muscle strength?
Yeah, jump performance can drop too, maybe up to 12%, though sometimes there's no change. Full recovery there usually takes somewhere between 48 hours and, again, potentially more than 72 hours.
So 3 days plus for jumping.
Possibly. And then maximal strength in the knee flexors, hamstrings, crucial for power and preventing injury, that can decrease by maybe 7% to 15% after a match. Recovery time, looking at 51 hours to, again, over 72 hours.
Right. And you can measure this stuff internally too, can't you? Like with those biochemical markers that indicate muscle damage. Creatine kinase, is that right?
That's the one, CK. It's a protein that gets released when muscle cells are damaged. And yeah, after a match, CK levels in the blood can shoot up dramatically. We're talking increases of anyway from 75% to 250% almost immediately.
250% increase.
Yeah, it shows significant muscle stress. And those levels typically peak around 24 to 48 hours after the match.
Okay, so a day or two later is when the damage marker is highest?
Yeah.
Or does it get back to normal?
That takes time. It usually returns to baseline levels somewhere between 69 and 120 hours post-match.
Wow, 120 hours. That's 5 days.
Potentially, yes.
So all these different measures, sprinting, jumping, strength, muscle damage markers, they're all pointing towards recovery taking longer than people might think. This brings us back to what you called the 72-hour problem.
Exactly. That's the crux of it. Numerous studies consistently show that players are just not fully recovered within those 3 days, 72 hours after a demanding match, which makes that common 3-day turnaround you see in packed schedules. Well, it's demonstrably not enough time for full physical recovery. It's a real tension in the modern game.
And I guess recovery isn't a fixed number either, is it? It must vary depending on the game, the player.
Oh, absolutely. The variability is huge. Recovery time can be influenced by loads of factors. Was it a win, lose, or draw? How good was the opposition? Was it home or away? What were the weather conditions, like extreme heat maybe? Even the type of pitch they played on.
Right. A heavy, waterlogged pitch is going to take more out of you than a perfect surface.
Exactly. All these things add up and affect how much fatigue is induced and therefore how long recovery takes.
Okay, so players are often heading back out onto the pitch before their bodies are truly ready. Which makes me wonder, what's actually causing this long-lasting fatigue? What's going on inside their bodies for days afterwards?
Well, the research points to 3 main culprits, 3 key mechanisms contributing to that post-match fatigue. These are glycogen depletion, muscle damage, and mental fatigue.
Okay, glycogen, muscle damage, mental fatigue. What about dehydration? Does that play a big role?
It can, but its impact on prolonged fatigue is usually more limited if the players follow good rehydration practices straight after the game. If they rehydrate properly, the other factors become more dominant over the following days.
Got it. So let's dig into muscle damage first. That sounds pretty central, given how explosive football is. What exactly causes that damage? Is it just running hard?
It's more specific than just running hard. The primary drivers of muscle damage seem to be the sheer repetition of changes of direction, accelerations, and decelerations. All those sharp cuts, bursts of speed, and sudden stops.
Right, the stop-start nature of the game.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating here is that studies show things like recovery of jump performance, sprint speed, repeated sprints. They're not actually strongly linked to the total distance a player covers or even how much high-intensity running they do.
Well, that's surprising. So it's not just about how far you run.
Apparently not for these specific recovery markers. Instead, researchers found significant links between the number of short sprints and how much muscle soreness players felt afterwards. And crucially, a strong link between the number of changes of direction and how much their jump performance decreased.
Okay. So it's those really explosive, demanding actions, the short bursts, the cutting movements that seem to do the most damage and take longer to recover from, rather than just steady running.
That seems to be the key takeaway, yes. It's the type and intensity of specific actions, not just the overall volume of running.
Makes sense. What about the second factor, glycogen depletion? That's basically the fuel in the muscles, right?
Right. Yep. Think of it as the muscle's primary energy store. And while running out of glycogen definitely contributes to fatigue during the later stages of a match, the issue for recovery is how long it takes to refill those stores.
How long does it take?
Even with a specific targeted nutrition plan designed to replenish glycogen quickly, it still takes about 2 to 3 days to fully restore muscle glycogen levels after a high-level match.
2 to 3 days just to refuel the muscles properly.
Yeah.
That's significant if you've got another game coming up quickly.
Absolutely. It directly impacts energy levels and the capacity to perform again at a high intensity.
Okay, and the third factor was mental fatigue. How does that fit into the recovery puzzle?
Mental fatigue is huge and probably often underestimated. When you have a really congested fixture list, players might just not get enough time to switch off and recover psychologically. This can lead to things like a lack of motivation, feeling mentally drained, maybe even burnout over time.
And travel must play into that too.
Definitely. Constant travel disrupts sleep patterns, messes with your body clock, your circadian rhythms. You're dealing with unfamiliar hotel rooms, maybe restricted movement on planes or buses. It all adds up to less quality rest and increased mental stress.
So it's this combination of muscle damage from explosive actions, slow glycogen refueling, and the buildup of mental fatigue.
Precisely. And understanding these specific drivers, the actions causing damage, the internal processes like refueling, that's what allows us to target recovery strategies much more effectively.
Right. So speaking of strategies, what are pro teams actually doing for recovery? And more importantly, what does the science say actually works? Because you often hear about all sorts of things, but is there sometimes a disconnect between popular practice and scientific evidence?
Oh, definitely. That gap between the latest research findings and what gets applied day-to-day in clubs is a well-known challenge in sports science. It takes time for research to filter down, and traditions can be hard to change.
So what are the common practices? Was there research looking into this?
Yes, there was a survey of 32 professional soccer teams asking about their go-to recovery strategies. Unsurprisingly, almost all of them, 97%, prioritized nutrition and hydration, and 95% focused on sleep. So the basics are well covered.
Okay, nutrition, hydration, sleep. Makes sense. What else?
Cold water immersion ice baths or contrast water therapy, that was used by 88%. Active recovery, like light cycling, was used by 81%. Massage came in at 78%.
Interesting. What about things like stretching or those compression tights?
Stretching was used by about half the teams, 50%. Compression garments were less common, only 22%. And things like electrical stimulation were used even less, around 13%.
So quite a range of methods being used, some much more popular than others. But you also touched on the placebo effect earlier.
Yeah.
How important is it that the players believe a strategy is helping them?
It's incredibly important and something you can't easily measure in a lab study. If a player genuinely believes that, say, a massage or a particular stretching routine helps them recover faster, then it can have a positive effect. Maybe it reduces their stress, maybe it makes them feel more prepared mentally. Even if the purely physiological benefit for performance recovery isn't strongly backed by science for that specific method, the belief itself matters hugely in a practical team setting.
Right, the psychological component is key. You need player buy-in.
Absolutely. If they trust the process and feel it helps, they're more likely to stick to the protocols. And that feeling of control and well-being can contribute to overall recovery.
Okay, so bearing that in mind, let's focus on the strategies where the scientific backing for actually improving performance recovery is strong. What are the real evidence-based pillars?
Right. If we focus purely on the science for getting physical performance back quicker, a few things really stand out. First, as the survey showed, nutrition and hydration are absolutely fundamental.
Makes sense. What are the key recommendations there?
For rehydration, it's about replacing fluids lost through sweat, obviously, but also helping with glycogen and protein synthesis. The recommendation is generally to drink about 150% to 200% of the body mass lost during the game.
Wow, 1.5 to 2 times the amount you lost.
Yeah, to ensure full rehydration. And crucially, that fluid should have a reasonably high sodium content, around 500 to 700 milligrams per liter, to help the body retain the water. The goal is to be fully rehydrated within about 6 hours post-match.
Okay, fluids sorted. What about food? Carbs and protein are the buzzwords, right?
Exactly. Carbohydrates are vital for refueling those muscle glycogen stores we talked about, which takes those 2 to 3 days. So starting immediately after the match, the advice is to consume about 1.2 grams of high glycemic index carbs per kilogram of body weight per hour.
High GI, so things that release sugar quickly.
Yeah, like white bread, pasta, potatoes, sugary drinks. You want that rapid absorption straight after the game. And you continue that intake at regular intervals, maybe every 15 to 60 minutes for up to 5 hours post-match. Interestingly, a high GI meal can also help people fall asleep faster.
Oh, that's a useful side effect. And protein.
Essential for repairing the muscle damage. The recommendation is around 20 grams of high-quality protein, like milk protein, or about 9 grams of essential amino acids, again, taken immediately after exercise.
Are there any specific drinks beyond just water or sports drinks that are particularly good?
Yes, a couple stand out in research. Flavored milk, especially chocolate milk, gets mentioned a lot. It's got a good mix of carbs and protein, plus amino acids like tryptophan, which might help with sleep.
The old wives' tale about warm milk before bed might have some science to it.
Sort of, yeah. And the other one is tart cherry juice or other berry juices. They're packed with antioxidants, which can help reduce inflammation and muscle soreness, and some studies suggest they accelerate strength recovery.
Interesting. Chocolate milk and cherry juice, who knew? Now, what about the big don't? What should players absolutely avoid after a match if they want to recover properly?
Alcohol. It really should be strongly avoided.
Why specifically?
Well, several reasons. First, it's a diuretic, meaning it makes you pee more, which works directly against rehydration efforts. Second, it's been shown to significantly slow down the muscle repair process. It hinders protein synthesis. And third, it messes with your sleep quality and efficiency, which is obviously vital for recovery.
That makes sense. But is it a common issue? Do players actually drink after games?
It can be. There was a survey in Italy's Serie A, and it found that 66% of players reported being regular drinkers. So despite the negative effects on recovery, it's clearly still prevalent in the culture for some.
Wow, 66%. That's a really high number given the known downsides.
Oh.
Okay, let's move on to the next pillar. Sleep. How critical is sleep, really?
Sleep is absolutely fundamental. You really can't overstate its importance for recovery. Sleep loss is directly linked to so many negative outcomes for athletes. Reduced endurance performance, lower maximal strength, impaired cognitive function like decision-making on the pitch, and even a weakened immune system.
Weakened immune system. How so?
Yeah, for example, studies have shown that people who consistently sleep less than 7 hours a night are about 3 times more likely to develop a common cold compared to those who sleep 8 hours or more. You don't want players getting sick all the time.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So how can athletes improve their sleep, especially with those crazy schedules, late-night games, and travel?
Well, some strategies can help. That high GI meal we mentioned, having it about 4 hours before bedtime, seems to help people fall asleep faster. Eating foods rich in tryptophan or melatonin, things like milk, meat, fish, those tart cherries, again, might also promote sleep.
And environment.
Absolutely. A dark, quiet, cool room is key. And trying to maintain a regular sleep-wake schedule as much as possible, even on days off, helps regulate the body clock.
What about naps? Are they useful?
Very useful. Short naps, maybe 20-30 minutes, particularly after lunch, can be really effective for boosting alertness and performance if you've had a bit of sleep loss the night before. And some research even shows that getting extra sleep consistently over several weeks sleep extension can actually improve athletic performance. Things like sprint times, reaction times, even shooting accuracy in basketball.
But fitting that sleep in must be tough in reality. You mentioned late games.
It's a huge challenge. In France, for example, something like 90% of matches are played at night. That means players might not actually get to bed until 1 a.m., maybe even as late as 5 a.m. sometimes, depending on travel. How do you plan the next day's training around that?
Yeah, it's tricky.
And you get the caffeine paradox. Players often take caffeine before a late game to boost performance.
But then they can't switch off and sleep afterwards.
Exactly. And then there's the decision for away games. Do you travel back straight after, potentially getting home very late, or stay overnight in a hotel? Many players actually prefer to get back to their own meds if they can arrive before, say, 2 a.m. It's all these practical things that complicate optimizing sleep.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare sometimes. Okay, pillar number 3, cold water immersion. Ice baths. They look painful. Do they actually work?
They might not be pleasant, but yes, the scientific evidence for cold water immersion, or CWI, is actually pretty strong. Several big reviews, meta-analyses have confirmed that CWI has positive effects on recovering anaerobic performance, things like strength, sprinting, jumping ability, and it's also effective in reducing delayed onset muscle soreness, that DOMS feeling.
Okay, so it helps with power and soreness. Is it good for all sports?
It seems particularly effective for sports involving weight-bearing impacts and collisions, like soccer, because the damage mechanism involves more body contact.
Got it. What's the recommended way to do it? How cold? How long?
The general recommendation is whole body immersion, so up to the neck if possible, for about 10 to 20 minutes. The water temperature should be between 12 and 15 degrees Celsius. That's about 54 to 59 Fahrenheit. And importantly, you should do it immediately after the match or a really heavy training session for the best effect.
And does sitting in an ice bath mess up your sleep later?
Good question. Studies have looked at that, and it seems CWI does not negatively affect sleep quality later that night, so that's a bonus.
Okay, good to know. And the last potential pillar you mentioned was compression garments, those tight leggings and tops. What's the verdict on them?
The evidence for compression garments is moderate, I'd say. They seem to have a moderate positive effect on helping muscle strength and power recover, and also on reducing muscle soreness, but maybe not quite as consistently or strongly as CWI.
How do they supposedly work?
The idea is that they apply graduated pressure tighter at the ankle, less tight higher up the leg, which is thought to help improve venous return, basically helping blood circulate back up from the limbs more efficiently. This might help clear metabolic byproducts or reduce swelling.
Are they useful in specific situations?
Yes, one area where they are definitely practical and recommended is during long-haul flights. Wearing compression garments can help reduce the risk of deep vein thrombosis or DVT, blood clots forming in the legs. So for traveling teams, they make a lot of sense.
Right. Okay, so we've got the strong contenders. Nutrition, hydration, sleep, cold water immersion, and maybe compression garments to a lesser extent. But what about those other strategies that are really popular, used by lots of teams, but maybe the science for performance recovery isn't quite as solid? You mentioned active recovery, massage, stretching.
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting, and where that difference between feeling better and actually performing better comes in. Let's take active recovery like a light spin on a bike or a gentle jog for 15-30 minutes after a game.
Super common, right? You see teams doing it all the time.
Very common, and it does help clear blood lactate faster than just sitting passively. That's true.
So that's good, isn't it? Getting rid of lactate.
Well, here's the thing. Faster lactate removal doesn't necessarily mean better performance in the next training session or game. The link just isn't that direct. In fact, some studies suggest that doing active recovery immediately after really intense exercise might even slightly impair how quickly your muscles replenish their glycogen stores.
Oh, okay, so it might actually slow down refueling.
Potentially, if done right away. The overall consensus from current evidence is that active recovery shows no significant benefit for restoring actual soccer-related physical performance like sprint speed or jump height any faster.
Huh. So it might feel good, like you're doing something proactive, but it's not speeding up your readiness for the next game's physical demands. What about massage? Surely that helps. Feels great.
It definitely feels great. And massage is widely used, no question. It can certainly help alleviate muscle soreness and significantly improve how recovered a player feels. Those psychological benefits are real and important. Players often report feeling looser, more relaxed, less stressed. But when you look at the studies measuring actual performance recovery, things like strength return, jump height, sprint times, most research finds no significant beneficial effect from massage. It helps you feel better, but doesn't necessarily make you physically capable of performing at your peak again any sooner.
Okay, that distinction is key. Feeling better versus performing better.
Hmm.
Now, stretching. This one surprises me because teams spend so much time on it.
They really do. I saw a stat that in some English Premiership clubs, flexibility work, which is mainly stretching, accounted for almost 40% of the total training time outside of actual football practice.
40%, that's huge.
It is.
Right.
And while stretching is absolutely useful for improving flexibility and range of motion, which can help prevent certain types of injuries, there is essentially no substantial scientific evidence to support using it as a tool to enhance post-exercise recovery or significantly reduce muscle soreness.
Really? No evidence for recovery.
Very little, if any, for speeding up performance recovery. Some studies even suggest that certain types of stretching, especially static stretching, held for long periods after intense eccentric exercise, like downhill running or lots of decelerations, might even slightly delay recovery or increase soreness markers.
Wow. So good for flexibility, maybe injury prevention, but not a recovery accelerator for performance.
Exactly. Its role is specific to range of motion, not speeding up the return of strength or power after fatigue.
Okay. And the last one was electrical stimulation, EMS. What's
Yeah.
the story there?
Similar picture, really. The vast majority of studies looking at EMS, I think it was 11 out of 12 in one review, failed to find any significant effect on a player's ability to maintain physical performance after exercise. There's some limited, weak evidence it might help reduce perceived muscle soreness, but it doesn't really stand up as a primary strategy for getting players back to their pre-match physical capabilities faster.
So for things like active recovery, massage, stretching, EMS, the main takeaway seems to be they might have psychological benefits or benefits for other things like flexibility, but they aren't the magic bullets for accelerating performance recovery that maybe some people think.
That's a fair summary. It really comes down to making that distinction. What helps you feel better versus what demonstrably helps your muscles recover their strength, power, and endurance capacity more quickly.
Yeah.
These popular methods often fall more into the first category than the second, based on the current science.
Okay, so bringing this all together, what does a practical, science-backed recovery protocol actually look like? If you were advising a team starting right after the final whistle, what would you tell them to do?
Right. Based on the strongest evidence, you'd want an integrated approach that starts immediately. An expert in this field actually proposed a pretty clear, practical 6-step protocol.
Okay, let's hear it. Step 1.
Step 1, hydration. As soon as possible, measure body mass loss from the game, weigh the player before and after. Then they need to drink 150% of that lost fluid volume. And remember, that fluid needs high sodium, 500-700 milligrams per liter to aid retention.
Okay, weigh and drink 1.5 times the loss with sodium. Step 2.
Step 2, specific beverages. Alongside the rehydration fluid, get them drinking some tart cherry juice and some chocolate milk. That combination hits multiple targets: glycogen replenishment, antioxidants to reduce inflammation, protein for muscle repair, and potentially aiding sleep later.
Got it. Cherry juice and chocolate milk. Step 3.
Step 3, cold bath, the CWI. Whole body immersion up to the neck, 12 to 15 degrees Celsius for 10 to 20 minutes. Do this as soon as practical after the game.
Okay, straight into the ice bath. Then what?
Step 4, compression. Once they're out of the bath and dried off, put on a compression garment full leg, ideally, and they should wear that until they go to bed.
Compression gear on until bedtime. Step 5.
Step 5, the post-match meal. Within 1 hour of finishing the game, they need a meal that's high in those high glycemic index carbohydrates and also contains good quality protein. Think easily digestible stuff. Maybe some soup, well-cooked white pasta or mashed potatoes, some lean chicken or fish, maybe yogurt, or even a small slice of cake for those quick carbs.
Fueling up within the hour. And the final step.
Step 6, sleep. Pretty simple, but absolutely crucial. Aim for a good, long, quality night's sleep. Facilitate this with the right environment, maybe those nutritional strategies we discussed earlier.
Hydrate, specific drinks, cold bath, compression, meal, sleep. Seems logical and covers the key evidence bases.
Exactly. It integrates the strategies with the strongest scientific backing for performance recovery into a practical timeline starting right after the match.
It's interesting, though, you mentioned earlier that even experts might use strategies without that strong performance evidence, like maybe putting players on bikes for active recovery. Why would that still happen in a pro setting?
Yeah, that's the reality of working with teams. Sometimes, as a coach or sports scientist, you have to do something. Players expect certain routines. If a team believes active recovery helps them, or if it's part of their established culture, removing it entirely might cause anxiety or disrupt team cohesion.
So the psychological aspect, the player belief, sometimes overrides the pure physiological science.
It can, or at least it needs to be carefully managed. If a method isn't harmful and it contributes significantly to player well-being, perceived recovery, or just keeps them engaged in a structured, positive recovery process, then it might still have a place. It's about balancing the hard science with the human element in that high-pressure environment.
That makes a lot of sense. So reflecting on everything we've discussed, it feels like you, the listener, now have a much clearer picture of what really helps elite footballers recover. It's about understanding the why behind the what from a scientific viewpoint.
Definitely. We've seen that while some traditional methods are really popular, the real power seems to lie in those evidence-based strategies. Getting the nutrition and hydration spot on, prioritizing quality sleep, using cold water immersion effectively.
It's clear that recovering from the massive demands of elite football isn't simple. It needs this complex, multifaceted approach. And it's not just about feeling less sore, it's about genuinely restoring that physical capacity to perform again safely and effectively.
Preventing injury and maintaining that peak performance level week after week.
So next time you're watching a big match, think beyond the 90 minutes on the pitch. Consider that hidden race against time, the recovery battle happening behind the scenes. And maybe ask yourself this: how might the future of football scheduling, or even how player contracts are structured, need to change if recovery science truly started to dictate the game?